Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. Today's card shows how to use Color Burst by Ken Oliver to create great backgrounds. I'm going to spend the first 12 minutes creating this card and then the last 3 minutes or so creating this card. Alright, so here are the products I'm using. The die that I'm using is called Lucky to Know You by Simon Says Stamp. And here are the Color Burst colors. I got the Brights collection, which gives you all the colors of the rainbow. I thought would be a good place to start. They are powder in a bottle, essentially. So I'm going to be using the purple and the blue, which is in line with our challenge this month for cool colors. So I'll pull those out. I found that I used a lot of water with these Color Burst powders. So I'm using Strathmore 140-pound watercolor cardstock. These are so potent. You can see that a little bit of dust of the blue got on my paper before I even opened the bottle. It's probably left over from the last time I used it. So these can be kind of messy, but the results they give you are really cool. So you can see the nozzle is a really thin nozzle, and what comes out is powder. So you just sort of shake it and it starts to come out, and you do not need very much. I have a pretty good amount of water on the paper. I'm going to add some more, but you could also put it onto the paper before you wet the paper and you'll get a different look that way. I prefer to wet the paper first, so I just sprayed it and then I'm just sprinkling some on. So I have blue on the left, purple on the right. Now I'm going to take more water and I'm just going to spray it, and you can see how vibrant these colors are. It's really beautiful, and these were really fun to work with. Lots of different things to do. Now if you like prediction, like things to be predictable, this is not the product for you, because you're going to get something completely different every single time. So I wasn't that happy with how I had purple on one half and blue on the other half. It's just the way I sprinkled the powder on. So I'm just lifting it up to kind of move the color around a little bit. I'm using my tweezers because I don't really want to get my hands that dirty. So I'm kind of moving it this way and seeing how it works. And then I'm going to pick it up from the other side, and then I'll drip it down the other side. But it really wasn't blending as much as I really wanted it to. I wanted some purple in the blue area, blue in the purple area. So now I'm going to add more water. I'm just kind of try to push it also from the side to get the colors going into the other half. And so when this wasn't working, I thought about adding more color. I'm like, no, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to dip it into the stuff I've already got. And that really helped a lot to get a little bit more blue on the purple side and vice versa. Then I add a little bit more water, and then I had the idea, well, I'll just kind of take a brush and some water and tap some water and some color in. So I'm going to take some water on my brush and then tap it on the cardstock, and then I'm going to pick up some of the water that's kind of on the craft mat and tap it in there too. And you can see that I'm getting a really beautiful kind of randomized, almost night sky look, and it is so cool. It's really, really neat. So I was happy with the way this was. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and I remember last time I talked about how my craft mat is new. My old craft mat, I cut it into little pieces so that I could use for this purpose for drying cardstock. So now I'm going to take another piece of this same watercolor cardstock, the 140-pound, and I'm just going to dip it in what I already have going here. So you can see that there's so much color because this powder is just really concentrated. So I'm going to kind of move it around a little bit with my tweezers, and I'm doing all this in real time so you can see how this works. And then when I pick it up, you can see that the colors have pretty well blended on their own, and now I have a nice smooth look. There were a couple of white spots that I'm trying to catch some color into, so I just keep kind of dipping it in on one side and the other. And so I like the way this was a lot smoother, but I wanted to add a little bit more purple because it was mostly blue at this point. So I thought I'll just sprinkle some more purple in. And it's very, very dark, but when you spray it, the more water you put on it, the lighter the color gets. So you can see it's still pretty dark, but as I add more and more water, and now I'm going to spray it from the other side, it really spreads the color around. It gives you a nice pretty color. So I thought this was interesting and unique in that I had kind of this dark purple with the light purple around it. So I'm going to let this dry as is. Same thing, I'm going to put it on another piece of this craft mat that I have. put it off to the side, and then I'm going to try something else. So I'm going to take another piece of cardstock. I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to dip it into the color here and just kind of paint it on my cardstock. So this is a nice technique if you just want to have like a nice pretty wash of color, something that's really smooth. You could put some water and some of the color burst on your craft mat and just pick it up with a paintbrush. So it took me a while. I'm holding it and I got my tweezers. I'm trying to get all the corners here. And I tried to make it pretty smooth, kind of making long strokes up and down the cardstock. So once I was done with creating covering all of the cardstock here, I'm going to put this off to dry. I'm running out of space, so I'm just going to stick it in the lower right hand corner or left of my craft mat. And now I'm going to take another piece of cardstock, and this time I'm going to spray it with water, and then I'm going to place it down. And then I'm just going to move it around, and you'll find that the color really isn't becoming less colorful. When I pick this up, you'll see that I'm getting a really nice blue, but it's still a pretty dark blue. So you can get a lot of cards made with just one sort of session, I guess, if you will, of this color burst. So I kind of dipped it a little bit here, and I decided I was just going to let this one dry. So I'm going to put it off to the side here, and I'll take my first one because I wanted to add some water spots to it. So it's kind of partially dry. There's no puddles in it or anything. So I'm just going to tap some water in there to see what happens. So I use kind of a medium-sized brush. And then I let it sit for just a few seconds, and then I took a tissue and I just sort of picked it up, and you can see that you definitely get some faded areas where you drop the water. If you had dropped the water when it was still kind of puddling with water before it had dried, then your water will kind of spread and you get some water staining and things like that. I just definitely wanted dots. So now I have a bigger brush. I'm tapping bigger drops of water, and I let it sit a little bit longer, but I still got pretty much the same look. And I did it in this big mess here because I still wanted to carry on with some other work on the other pieces. So now that I've done the water spots on this, it looks like a beautiful night sky. So I was really happy with that. Put that off to dry. And now I'm going to take the one that I did the stripes with my brush, and I'm going to take some water on that same big fat brush. It's a number 12 round brush, and I touched the cardstock a little bit, and then a lot of it I just sort of dropped it, and then I let that sit for even longer, and you can see that the water really fades away a lot of that color. And I thought that was cool, but it was a little too much, and so I decided I was going to grab some of the paint that was left over and take a brush and tap in color. So now I have color removed, dots, and then colorful dots. And so I'm going to take that and put that off to the side and let it dry. And then finally I'm going to take the last one I did that kind of had that uniform blue color, and I'm going to, now that it's dry, I'm going to dip it back in to get another layer of this color, and you can see that it's still incredibly colorful. So I was still getting like really full kind of areas of color. So, but I did get some, you can see in the lower portion of some smaller dots. So what I decided to do is dry it up again, and this time clean up some of this color so it's not so puddly. And that way I can get smaller sort of interesting texture on this last piece. So I'm going to flip it over and just press it into the smaller areas of color here and there, and I still have that stripe there, which gives me a little bit wider area of color. So I'm just going to keep going back and forth, and then I dried it again, and that allows the water to sort of seep into the cardstock and become a little bit more permanent, and then dip it again, and now I have all these different small areas of color. And I think this ended up being one of my favorites. Well, the first one's definitely my favorite, but I really liked this one a lot. I think it'd make a pretty background. So anyway, here are the 4 in total. So this is the first one, and you can see where the color burst didn't spread out, it's almost metallic right there. And so it looks really cool, and I like the white spots on it. The next one is where I added that additional purple, and you can see that the water, I didn't soak up the water on the sides, so it crept back onto my cardstock. But I think the purple is really cool, and I'm going to use this to create that second card, and I'll trim off those sides. The third one is where I had the clear spots, and then I added the additional colorful spots. It's probably my least favorite, but it would make a pretty good water background, I think. And then finally, the one that I did last, where I cleaned up my craft mat a little bit and just kept dipping it in to get different size droplets. I really like this one a lot too, because it is also faded on the right hand side, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to grab this first panel, and I'm going to cut it so that it's 3¼ inches high. And then I'm going to take my die cut and cut it out of some white cardstock. And I'm centering it here, and I'm using my T-square to make sure that the to know is kind of even on the same row, because it's kind of hard to tell how to tilt this sentiment. And notice that I'm using the negative to help place my sentiment so that all the letters are kind of in line with each other, because there are multiple pieces. I'm going to adhere this with just a piece of masking tape that I had handy, and I'm going to hold the parts with my tweezers and put some two-way glue pen on the back. And then I'll kind of put it inside my negative here. And I didn't put some adhesive on the top part of that K, so that since it's hanging off the side. So I'm going to press it down, and then I'm going to do all the pieces the same way. And I'm just going to lift it up each time I put a piece down, just to make sure nothing's sticking and everything is in its right place. And then I'll line it back up, because it doesn't really have to be perfect. And I'm going to do all these pieces until I get to the end, and then I'll lift the whole piece of the negative off, and then I'm left with a nice even sentiment. I'm going to use washi tape for my border, and I did this in another video, so I'm going to mark the top and the bottom where this is going to be on my card base. I'm going to measure, for this one I measured 3/16 of an inch out from those markings from the watercolor panel, and then I'll turn my T-square so that I can draw that 3/16 of an inch mark. I'm going to draw a guide all the way across my card, and that way 3/16 of my washi tape will show past my card, my watercolor cardstock panel. So this is actually from American Crafts. It's got adhesive on the back, so I just peeled it off and put it against that guide. I have my Avery Elle finish frames, and I usually use it for the frames, but it has a ton of star dies in it. So I'm going to cut that out of some Neenah cardstock, and I also cut some stars out of my washi tape so they would match my border. It was pretty easy to do, so I've already cut that. I'm going to put a couple of, or 3 pieces of Scotch foam tape on the back of my watercolor panel, and I'm going to center that right between my washi tape. And then I'm going to take a pick-me-up stick, which has a sticky side here. I'm going to open it up, and you can twist it to kind of push some more of that sticky stuff out. And then on the other side, there's kind of a pointer tool that you can use to release the items from the sticky side. So I'm going to pick up each of these stars, and what I like about these stars is that some of them are only 4 points, which gives me a little bit of a variety. So once I get them positioned, I kind of randomly place them around, some silver and some white. I'm going to peel the backing off the silver ones and place them down. And then for the Neenah ones that I cut out, I'm just going to use some multi-medium matte by Ranger and put it underneath each of them, and that'll stick it to the cardstock. And that is the Lucky to Know You card. I really like these colors, came out really pretty. So now I'm going to show you what I did with the one that had kind of that purple that I added afterwards, and I cut off where the water had seeped back in, and I'm using the You're Remarkable set by Stampin' Up, and I'm going through this really quickly. So I'm just heat embossing white on it with this kind of lily flower. And I'm going to put some plain water. So I thought maybe I can remove, this is actually card in design mode because I didn't do this beforehand. So I'm going to drop a bunch of water in there, and then I'll take a paper towel and I'll lift up some of the color. And I did this a bunch of times on both flowers. I'm going to fast forward so you can see what my end result was. It was definitely faded, but it doesn't remove all the color. So I decided I didn't like that as much, and so I decided I was going to take some black soot and some water and a paintbrush. And so I'm going to actually color some parts of this black. At first I thought maybe just the shadow areas, and then I dropped too much black. I didn't like the way it was so dark, so I ended up adding more water, and then I wiped away a little bit of the color. So I just have a hint of black, and then I dropped some darker color into the shadow areas where the inside of the flower was. So it took me a few minutes to do this, and I'm just fast forwarding here, but I just did it to the flower. I didn't touch the stem at all. I wanted to put something in the flower center to make it stand out a little bit, so I got my Fine-Tech watercolors, which go really well with dark cardstock, and so I'm going to use the gold here. And I mean, it wasn't that bright, but it did sort of the job. I mean, I wish I had something a little bit brighter, but anyway, so I'm going to put this against a card base and see what my next steps are going to be. So I tried this sentiment from Simon Says Stamp, and then I tried this one. It was too small. The other one didn't have the right font, and then I really like the font of Sheltering Tree, so I stamped that onto some white cardstock, and I thought I really needed a little bit of white on top of this. So when I put it on, I thought, you know, I need a little something extra. So I took my linen thread and decided to kind of wrap it around several times. So I just put some ATD tape runner on the back and I wrapped it around a bunch and then I cut it off, and I did that on both sides of the sentiment. And then I decided to put my watercolor panel onto my card base so that I have something to work on. And then I put some Tombow Mono Multi Glue on the top of that linen thread just to make sure that it didn't come undone. And I have Scotch foam tape on the right and the left. And now I'm going to peel away the center, and I'm going to put that right at the base of that stem, so it kind of looks like it's coming out of my sentiment. And then I formed a bow out of that same linen thread, and I adhered it with a glue dot to the corner, kind of angled a little bit so that it wouldn't get in the way of the sentiment. And then for the centers, I took a Copic liner, a 0.05 I think, and it's so tiny. And I just did little dots for an added detail. And that's the card for today. I thought that purple kind of thing at the top was really cool. I really wanted to use that as a background. So anyway, those are the cards for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed seeing these color bursts and you'll try them for yourself. They're really fun to use and to experiment with. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.